So let's talk about something we all hold dear in South Africa: faith. It's a source of strength, community, and for many, a guiding light in tough times. But what happens when that light gets a little shady? When the collection plate starts looking more like a personal ATM for the person on the pulpit? Today we're diving headfirst into a topic that's as sensitive as it is important. We're exposing the top 10 corrupt churches in South Africa. Now I know what you're thinking, Trevor. Are you trying to get struck by lightning? Maybe. But someone needs to talk about this. This isn't about attacking belief itself. Not at all. This is about pulling back the curtain on institutions that allegedly exploit that very belief for personal gain. It's about the fundamental need for transparency and accountability, especially when dealing with people's hope and their hard-earned money. When you give your faith and your 10% to an organization, you have a right to know where it's going. Is it building a community center, or is it funding a pastor's third private jet? These are the questions we need to ask. Because let's be honest, the line between profit and profit can sometimes get incredibly blurry. We've seen headlines that make you do a double take, stories of miracles that seem more like magic tricks, and financial empires built on the backs of the faithful. We're going to unpack the allegations, look at the evidence, and explore why these situations keep happening. This is about empowering you, the viewer, with information. So grab your tea, settle in, and let's talk about the business of belief in Mzansi. Alright, let's kick things off with a name that has been in the headlines so much, you'd think he was a politician. Shepherd Bushiri and his Enlightened Christian Gathering Church, or ECG. This was more than just a church, it was an event. Thousands would flock to his services, drawn by promises of miracle money appearing in their bank accounts and prophecies delivered with the flair of a Vegas magician. The scale was massive, the energy was electric, and the donations, well, they were biblical in proportion. But behind the spectacle, a different story was unfolding. The Hawks, South Africa's elite police unit, started taking a very close look. Allegations of fraud, money laundering, and theft piled up, amounting to over 100 million rand. Think about that. That's not just tithing. That's a corporate-level operation. The authorities claimed Bushiri and his wife, Mary, were running a sophisticated pyramid scheme, promising huge returns on investments that, surprise, never materialized. It was the age-old story: take from the poor, give to the guy who already has a fleet of luxury cars. The church's business model seemed to be built on selling hope at a premium. Anointed oils, special wristbands, exclusive prayer sessions, all came with a price tag. It's a brilliant strategy if you think about it. You're not just selling a product, you're selling a direct line to God, and who's going to bargain on that? The problem is when the miracles seem to benefit the pastor's lifestyle far more than the congregation's well-being. People were selling their homes, their cars, everything to invest in a promise that investigators say was empty from the start. And then came the grand finale, the plot twist no one saw coming. After being granted bail, the Bushiris pulled off a disappearing act that would make Houdini proud. They fled South Africa and reappeared in their home country of Malawi, leaving behind a trail of angry investors, bewildered followers, and a very embarrassed South African government. How do you skip the country when you're one of the most famous people in it? It's a question that still hangs in the air, a testament to the influence and resources at their disposal. The fallout from the ECG saga is a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked power in religious spaces. It exposed weaknesses in our legal and border control systems and, more importantly, highlighted the vulnerability of people searching for hope. The church continues to operate, but the scandal has left an indelible stain, a cautionary tale of a shepherd who, according to authorities, was more interested in fleecing the flock than feeding it. The case is ongoing, but the Great Escape left a clear message about accountability, or the lack thereof. Next up we have Rivers of Living Waters Ministries, led by the ever-flamboyant Archbishop Stephen Zondo. Now Bishop Zondo is a character. His sermons are passionate, his style is memorable, and his church has a massive following. He presents himself as a man of God dedicated to healing and deliverance. But for years, whispers and then shouts of controversy have swirled around him and his ministry, painting a much darker picture than the one seen on Sunday mornings. The most damning accusations came to light during the CRL Rights Commission hearings. The commission, set up to investigate the commercialization of religion, heard some truly shocking testimony. Former members of the church came forward with stories of horrific sexual abuse, alleging that Archbishop Zondo used his position of power and spiritual authority to manipulate and assault them. These weren't just disgruntled followers, these were people detailing years of trauma, claiming the church environment enabled the abuse to continue unchecked. Beyond these deeply disturbing allegations, there were also serious questions about the church's finances. Where was all the money going? Congregants spoke of immense pressure to give, to sow seeds of faith that often translated into significant sums of cash. Yet the financial workings of the ministry remained opaque. Critics and former insiders described a system where church funds and the archbishop's personal wealth seemed to be one and the same, with little to no formal oversight or accountability for the millions of rands flowing into the ministry's coffers. The archbishop, for his part, has vehemently denied all the allegations against him. He's framed the accusations as a concerted attack by his enemies, people trying to bring down his ministry. He has taken to the pulpit to defend himself, often casting himself as a martyr being persecuted for his faith. This is a common tactic, unfortunately. By framing legal and ethical challenges as spiritual warfare, it can discourage followers from questioning the leader and dismiss credible accusations as mere slander from the devil. The case of Rivers of Living Waters Ministries is a complex and painful one. It sits at the intersection of faith, power, and alleged abuse. The legal battles are ongoing and the full truth is still being fought over in courtrooms and in the court of public opinion, but it serves as a critical example of why accountability structures are so vital. When one person holds all the spiritual and financial power, the potential for exploitation, as alleged in this case, becomes frighteningly real. If the name Incredible Happenings Ministries doesn't give you a clue, I don't know what will. It's like calling your restaurant edible food. You're setting the bar pretty low. This ministry is led by Pastor Paseka Motsoeneng, better known as Prophet Mboro. Mboro is less of a pastor and more of a religious celebrity, a master of the spectacle who is never far from a camera or a controversy. His brand of Christianity is loud, proud, and very, very public. The list of Mboro's incredible happenings is long and frankly bizarre. He once claimed to have gone to heaven and taken a selfie as proof. When people asked to see the picture, he said the angels had confiscated his phone. Convenient. Then there was the time he claimed to have visited hell and killed Satan. You'd think that would solve a lot of the world's problems, but apparently not. These claims, while comical to outsiders, are presented as divine truth to his followers, blurring the lines between faith and pure fantasy. But it's not all fun and games and celestial selfies. Serious financial questions have followed Prophet Mboro for years. He is known for his lavish lifestyle, complete with luxury cars and designer clothes, which he attributes to God's blessings. However, critics and former congregants allege that these blessings are funded by the aggressive solicitation of donations from his flock. People are encouraged to give generously to receive their own miracles, a transactional form of faith that seems to disproportionately benefit the man at the top. The church has faced numerous accusations of fraud and misuse of funds. There have been stories of people selling their possessions to pay for Mboro's special prayers or anointing oils, only to find themselves in deeper financial trouble. The CRL Rights Commission also had him in their sights, questioning the source of his wealth and the lack of financial transparency within his ministry. His response has often been defiant, accusing his critics of being jealous of his success and his connection to God. Incredible happenings. Ministries is a prime example of personality-driven religion. The church is Mboro, and Mboro is the church. His larger-than-life persona is the main attraction, and his sensational claims are the product. While he provides a spectacle that many find compelling, it raises serious questions about pastoral responsibility. Is a pastor's role to guide and support their congregation, or is it to create a profitable brand built on unverifiable claims, and as alleged by many, the financial exploitation of the faithful? Now we turn to an international giant with a major footprint in South Africa, the Universal Church of the Kingdom of God, or UCKG. Originally from Brazil, this church has spread across the globe, establishing a powerful presence in many countries, including ours. On the surface, it's a slick, well-organized operation. They have prime real estate, television slots, and a massive membership. They promise to solve all of life's problems, from financial debt to sickness and demonic possession. But beneath this polished exterior lies a long and troubled history of serious allegations. The UCKG has been embroiled in legal battles and corruption claims for decades, not just in South Africa, but around the world. Investigations in its home country of Brazil have accused the church's leadership of a host of crimes, including money laundering, racketeering, and systematically defrauding their followers. The central accusation, really, is that the church is not a religious institution but a multi-billion-dollar business empire masquerading as one. The core of their fundraising strategy is what's often called the prosperity gospel, but on steroids. Congregants are taught that their financial donations are a direct measure of their faith. The more you give, the more God will bless you. Tithing is not just encouraged, it's often presented as a divine obligation. Former members have described immense pressure to give everything they can, sometimes being told to take out loans or sell their properties to donate to the church, all in the hope of receiving a miracle that will solve their problems. In South Africa, the UCKG has faced its own share of scandals. There have been accusations of coercive tithing practices and exploitation of vulnerable people. Perhaps most shockingly, there were allegations of a scheme where church leaders forced pastors to undergo vasectomies, supposedly so they could dedicate their lives fully to the church without the distraction of a family. The church denied this, but the allegations made by former pastors painted a chilling picture of a controlling and cult-like environment. The UCKG is a case study in the complexities of globalized religion and the challenges of regulation. Its immense wealth and international structure make it difficult for any single country to hold it fully accountable. While it provides a sense of community and hope for millions, the persistent and serious allegations of financial and personal exploitation cannot be ignored. It forces us to ask a difficult question. Where is the line between a church that helps people and a corporation that profits from them? Let's journey to the Eastern Cape, to Shekinah Healing Ministries, led by Pastor Banele Mankoba. This ministry gained notoriety not for its size, but for the shocking and tragic events that unfolded there. The church operated from a compound in Nkobo, presenting itself as a place of refuge and divine healing. People from all over the country, disillusioned with modern life and seeking spiritual solace, went to live there, giving up their old lives for a new one under Pastor Mankoba's guidance. The problems began to surface when families reported that their relatives who had joined the ministry had cut off all contact. They were no longer allowed to work worldly jobs or send their children to school, as these were deemed sinful. The compound became increasingly isolated, a world unto itself with Pastor Mankoba, who referred to himself as an angel, at its center. This level of control and isolation is a classic red flag, creating an environment where followers become entirely dependent on the leader for their physical, financial, and spiritual needs. The situation escalated dramatically into a national tragedy. A group of men linked to the ministry attacked a police station in Nkobo, killing 5 police officers and a retired soldier. The motive was reportedly to steal firearms. The brazen and violent attack sent shockwaves through the country and put a massive spotlight on the secretive compound. It was no longer just a case of a strange church. It was now linked to a violent criminal enterprise. In the ensuing manhunt, police tracked the suspects back to the Shekinah Ministries compound. A deadly shootout followed, resulting in the deaths of 7 people inside the church, including some of the Mankoba brothers who led the ministry. The aftermath was a scene of horror and confusion. What was discovered was a cult-like environment where congregants had been living in poor conditions, allegedly being exploited for their money and labor, all under the guise of religious devotion. The Nkobo massacre is a tragic example of how spiritual manipulation can lead to devastating real-world consequences. It wasn't just about financial misconduct, it was about a complete breakdown of societal norms fueled by a dangerous ideology. It showed how a charismatic leader can isolate followers and lead them down a path of fanaticism and violence. Shekinah Healing Ministries serves as a grim and powerful warning about the dangers of unregulated, isolated religious groups and the extreme exploitation they can foster. And now for a story that broke the internet. If you were online in early 2019, you definitely saw this. I'm talking about Alleluia Ministries International, or AMI, and its leader, Pastor Alf Lukau. This ministry was already known for its opulence and promises of miracle wealth, but it shot to global infamy with one of the most audacious stunts ever caught on camera, a supposed resurrection. Yes, you heard me right, not turning water into wine but bringing a man back from the dead. The video was cinematic. A coffin arrives at the church, a grieving family weeps, and Pastor Lukau, with dramatic flair, commands the dead man inside to rise. And he does. He sits up, looking a bit confused, and starts eating. It was a miracle. Or was it? The internet's detectives immediately got to work. People pointed out that the man, later identified as Brighton Moyo, was looking pretty healthy for a corpse. His cheeks were a bit too rosy, his breathing a bit too regular. The story quickly unraveled. Funeral parlors that were allegedly involved came forward to distance themselves, stating they were manipulated and that the man was alive the whole time. Journalists tracked down Brighton Moyo's former employer, who said he was a perfectly healthy timber worker. The whole thing was exposed as an elaborate and frankly ridiculous fake. It was a piece of religious theater designed to amaze the congregation, boost the pastor's profile, and presumably encourage more donations from awestruck believers. The backlash was immense. The incident sparked widespread outrage and ridicule, with the hashtag Resurrection Challenge trending as people mocked the fake miracle. But beyond the jokes, there were serious implications. The CRL Rights Commission launched an investigation, and Pastor Lukau eventually offered a half-hearted apology, not for faking the miracle, but for misrepresenting the situation. He claimed the man was already alive when he arrived and he had simply completed the miracle. Right. Alleluia Ministries International and the resurrection scandal became a symbol of the commercialization of faith at its most cynical. It showed a willingness to stage elaborate hoaxes to manipulate people's deepest beliefs about life and death. It wasn't just about misleading people, it was about profiting from that deception. The incident forced a national conversation about the need for regulation and what should happen when a man of God is caught in a very worldly lie. If you thought the resurrection was strange, hold on to your hats. We're now going to Rabboni Center Ministries led by Pastor Lesego Daniel. This ministry became famous not so much for financial controversy, although there were whispers, but for its incredibly bizarre and dangerous practices, all performed in the name of demonstrating faith. Pastor Daniel took the idea of God works in mysterious ways to a whole new level. It all started with grass. Yes, grass. Pastor Daniel instructed his congregants to eat grass from the church grounds to be closer to God, and they did. Images went viral showing people on their hands and knees munching on the lawn like livestock. He claimed this would heal them of their illnesses. Medical experts unsurprisingly warned that this was not only unhelpful but could be dangerous, as grass is indigestible for humans and could contain pesticides or parasites. But he didn't stop at grass. The demonstrations of faith became progressively more extreme. In one incident, he had followers drink petrol, claiming he had miraculously turned it into pineapple juice. Again, people lined up to drink the flammable liquid. The health risks are obvious and severe. This isn't faith, it's poison. It's an abuse of trust so profound that you're convincing people to harm themselves for your own theological theater. Then came the snakes. Pastor Daniel declared that a snake was no longer a snake but had been turned into chocolate, and he encouraged a congregant to eat it. While later reports clarified it might have been a rubber snake used as a prop, the message was the same. If the pastor says it, you do it, no matter how insane it sounds. These acts were all about demonstrating the pastor's absolute power. It was a test of loyalty, seeing how far his followers would go and how much they would suspend their own judgment and survival instincts. The story of Rabboni Center Ministries is a disturbing look at the psychology of control. While direct financial corruption wasn't the headline story here, the exploitation was just as real. Pastor Daniel was exploiting his congregation's faith and trust, not just for money, but for power and control, turning them into props in his dangerous sideshow. These practices led to widespread condemnation and investigations, highlighting a different kind of corruption. A corruption of the pastoral duty to protect and care for one's flock, not lead them to eat grass and drink gasoline. Our next case takes us to Pretoria and the Mount Zion General Assembly. This church's story is less about bizarre miracles and more about a classic old-fashioned power struggle, complete with accusations of corruption, leadership disputes, and even violence. It's a reminder that sometimes church politics can be just as messy and ruthless as any corporate or political battle. The fight wasn't over heavenly crowns, but earthly control and assets. The conflict erupted into the public eye when a faction of the church tried to oust its leader, Bishop Mthuzeli Namba. The breakaway group accused the bishop of running the church like a personal fiefdom, making unilateral decisions and, most importantly, mismanaging the church's finances. They alleged that millions of rands in church funds were unaccounted for, and that the bishop was living a lavish lifestyle that was inconsistent with his official church salary. The dispute turned ugly and spilled out of the boardroom and into the pews. Services were disrupted by shouting matches and scuffles between the rival factions. At one point, the police had to be called in to restore order during a Sunday service. Imagine trying to have a moment of quiet prayer while two groups are literally fighting for control of the pulpit. It became a holy war fought in the house of God itself, with both sides claiming to be the rightful leaders of the ministry. The core of the issue, as is so often the case, was money and power. The church had significant assets, including property and a steady stream of income from its large congregation. The faction challenging Bishop Namba claimed they wanted to install a system of transparency and collective leadership, while the bishop's supporters maintained he was the victim of a jealous coup attempt by people who wanted to seize control for themselves. The truth, as is often the case in such disputes, was likely somewhere in the murky middle. The saga of Mount Zion General Assembly highlights the critical need for good governance within religious institutions. When a church lacks clear, transparent structures for financial management and leadership succession, it becomes vulnerable to these kinds of internal conflicts. It becomes a battle for control of the assets, rather than a mission to serve the community. The congregation is caught in the middle, their faith and their contributions becoming ammunition in a fight that has very little to do with spirituality. This chapter deals with the South African branch of a massive Nigerian ministry, the Synagogue, Church of All Nations, or SCOAN, founded by the late and highly influential prophet T.B. Joshua. For years, SCOAN was a major destination for religious tourism. People from all over the world, including thousands of South Africans, would travel to Lagos, Nigeria, seeking healing and miracles from Prophet Joshua. His influence was immense, and his church was a global phenomenon. The biggest controversy to hit the church, and one that deeply affected South Africa, was the tragic guest house collapse in 2014. A multi-story building on the church's campus in Lagos crumbled to the ground, killing 116 people. Of those who died, 84 were South Africans who had traveled there on a pilgrimage. It was a national tragedy for our country, a devastating loss of life that happened thousands of kilometers from home, at a place people went to find hope. The aftermath of the collapse revealed a shocking story of alleged negligence and corruption. A Nigerian coroner's inquest found that the building had been constructed illegally, without proper permits, and with substandard materials. The inquest ruled that the church should be investigated and prosecuted for criminal negligence. T.B. Joshua and the church, however, had a different explanation. They claimed it was a spiritual attack, suggesting a mysterious small plane that flew over the building shortly before the collapse was part of a conspiracy to sabotage the ministry. This response caused immense pain and anger back in South Africa. The families of the victims felt that the church was trying to evade responsibility for the deaths of their loved ones by blaming it on supernatural forces. They wanted accountability, not conspiracy theories. The South African government expressed its frustration with the slow pace of the investigation in Nigeria. The incident strained diplomatic relations and raised serious questions about the lack of regulation and safety standards at these massive religious compounds. The SCOAN tragedy is a powerful and heartbreaking example of what can happen when faith institutions operate outside the bounds of secular law and accountability. The pursuit of miracles and spiritual experiences should never come at the cost of basic safety and human life. While the South African branch itself wasn't directly responsible for the collapse, the event deeply impacted its members and the nation, serving as a stark reminder of the potential dangers when a religious organization's power and influence grow so large that it believes it is above the law. Finally, we arrive at Grace Bible Church, one of the largest and most well-known charismatic churches in South Africa, led by Bishop Moses Sono. Unlike some of the others on this list, Grace Bible Church hasn't been rocked by scandals involving fake resurrections or grass eating. The controversies here are more subtle, but they touch on issues of wealth, commercialization, and social responsibility that are just as important. The main criticism leveled against Grace Bible Church and Bishop Sono revolves around the prosperity gospel. This is the teaching that God wants believers to be wealthy, and that financial donations to the church are a key to unlocking that wealth. Critics argue that this doctrine puts an undue burden on congregants, especially those who are poor, encouraging them to give money they don't have in the hope of a divine financial bailout. It can create a cycle of debt and disappointment, all while enriching the church leadership. The church has also faced public criticism for its perceived focus on wealth and its high-profile, affluent members. In one infamous incident, a guest pastor, Bishop Dag Heward-Mills from Ghana, was invited to preach and spent his sermon making homophobic remarks and condemning homosexuality. While Bishop Sono later apologized for the comments, the incident sparked a fierce debate about the church's stance on social issues and whether its teachings were inclusive and compassionate to all people. Furthermore, there have been questions about the church's own financial transparency and the lifestyle of its leadership. Like many megachurches, Grace Bible Church is a multi-million rand operation. It has a massive campus, a large staff, and extensive media operations. Congregants are encouraged to tithe faithfully, but where exactly all that money goes is not always clear to the public or even to the members themselves. This lack of transparency fuels suspicion and criticism that the church operates more like a business than a non-profit spiritual body. Grace Bible Church represents a more mainstream corporate version of the issues we've been discussing. It may not be as outlandish as some of the others, but the core questions remain. Is the church's primary focus on spiritual guidance or on fundraising? Does the prosperity gospel truly empower the poor, or does it exploit their hope for the financial benefit of the institution? These are the complex, uncomfortable questions that arise when faith becomes intertwined with big business, and they are crucial for ensuring that our religious institutions remain places of genuine support and community. So, there you have it. 10 churches, 10 stories of controversy, corruption, and questions. From fake miracles and financial empires to tragic negligence and the abuse of power, it's clear that faith can be a fertile ground for exploitation when left unchecked. This journey wasn't about destroying belief, but about defending it. True faith, in any form, deserves to be housed in institutions that are honest, transparent, and genuinely dedicated to the well-being of their communities, not just the enrichment of their leaders. The responsibility for this doesn't just lie with commissions and law enforcement, it lies with all of us. Holding religious institutions accountable is vital for a healthy society. We must be willing to ask the tough questions, to demand financial transparency, and to support leaders who practice humility and service over showmanship and self-enrichment. We need to create a culture where it's okay to question, to be critical, and to expect the same level of integrity from our pastors that we would from our politicians or CEOs. Ultimately, the power is in your hands. I encourage you to do your own research. Read, listen, and think critically about where you place your trust and your resources. Support organizations that are open about their finances and have strong, independent governance. Stay informed, stay engaged, and don't be afraid to speak up. Because protecting the integrity of faith means being brave enough to call out those who would corrupt it for their own gain. Thank you for watching.